Calvin, thank you so much for joining us. It's an absolute pleasure. I just wanted to start at the beginning. How did you realize that fashion was your area?
Well, I grew up and was influenced a great deal by my mother and my grandmother. My mother loved clothes, and no one in the family was in the business. But I developed an interest from the time I was 5 or 6 years old. I would sketch. I had the gift that I was able to draw. So in fashion, that's a big help. And I just always seemed to know that I had this interest. And the interest developed. I studied art in grade school, high school, and then college. But I was always gearing myself to not be a painter or a sculptor, but to work with a team of people, collaborate, and create.
And how did that develop into launching your own company with your friend Barry Schwartz?
Well, I was ambitious, and I knew from a young age that I would probably want to have an establishment of my own, rather than just a job. I thought I had something to say, and I thought the way that I could say it was if I was in control of the company. And so I figured out a way to do it with very little money. And I was on a job. I convinced people who made patterns and who would sew up clothes to work for me at night and on the weekends. And this little man who was the sample tailor, fantastic fellow, he had a sewing machine in his daughter's bedroom, and he would sew up the clothes that I had sketched, and someone else made a pattern. That person lived in a different location. I'd buy the fabric, they would cut the fabric. I ended up with 6 samples and ready to resign my job when they fired me, because they found out that that's what I was doing. So I figured out a way to do this inexpensively. And that's one thing that's great about fashion. You can start off really small. If you have an idea, if you have something in mind that's different than what's out there, you have a shot without having to have a great deal of money.
And you had your first major showing at New York Fashion Week, and it was immediately successful. So what do you attribute that success to?
I think in the end, just being true to myself. I wasn't trying to please Vogue magazine. I thought if the editors like what we're doing, fine. If they don't like, I don't really care, because I was more interested in the client, in the women who would buy the clothes. And if they saw that we were doing something that appealed to them, that was my way of thinking. So it was, I would say it was easy for me to do the shows. I mean, in one sense, you're creating, and then before you present the collection, you have to edit. And editing your own work is not easy, because I'd have a group of assistants around me saying, oh, this is so great, and that's so great, you know, it has to be on the runway. And I'd say, it's not strong enough. It's not as strong as some of the other pieces. And I would find that I was just editing all the time. So having that confidence came across on the runway. And so we looked different than everyone who was trying to appeal to a fashion critic or to a magazine. We weren't trying that hard to be different.
What do you think it is fundamentally that differentiates a successful line of designer clothing from an unsuccessful one?
What is it? Say it again.
That differentiates a really successful line?
Depends on how you define success. I mean, for me, success is how good I feel about what I've done. If I can honestly feel we really worked hard and we did it, you know, I love the clothes, or I love the TV commercials, or I love whatever we were doing, that's success. You can't please all the people all the time. So if you're going to get your sense of success from what other people think, I think it's a recipe for losing. I think it has to come from what you feel and what the people that work with you, who you trust, what they feel. And yes, financial success but it's not everything at all.
I'm sure there are many in the audience who might want to go into fashion themselves. So what are the key lessons that you've learned from your years?
The key assets?
Key lessons, if you were to advise them.
Well, maybe we leave that until you can ask some questions, because there are so many things. I mean, I think the assets that I had is I had some sort of a gift. I was able to draw, an artist. I had a passion for design, and I was driven. And that combination of working 24/7, you know, most of my life, you know, that helped to make me successful.
And the company almost faced bankruptcy quite early on in the 90s. How did you turn that around?
We, almost everyone who's successful has faced that problem. We had a cash crunch. We had money coming in, but there was more going out for a few months. And so it was Mike Milken, who I don't know if any of you know who he is, or well, he still is. He was the junk bond king in the United States. And he lent money, billions, to people who no one else would lend money to. When the banks, when no one will give you anything, you go to Mike Milken, back in the late 80s and 90s. And he's a friend, I mean, to this day. And he said, I'll support you, I'll take care of you. Because he could see what other people couldn't see, which was 3 months from now, we'd be fine. Because we had money coming in from some of the largest companies in the world. But everyone was looking at today. They didn't have the vision to see what was happening in the near future.
So you get into it as a designer, and I find this really interesting, but you're also at the head of this multi-million-dollar business. So how do you kind of balance the design side of things, which is your passion, with also having to be in charge of this massive business organization?
Well, I didn't love spending a lot of time with the accountants and the lawyers and all of those people. But I did what I had to do. When Mike Milken arranged for us to have the money we needed, then he said, well, you're going to have to do a road show. Now, I don't know if any of you are studying business or finance, but the road show is you go around the country and you tell all of these investors what you're doing and why they should invest in you. And I never thought I'd have to do that, but it was great. It was really great. These people are all, the people who invest all over the country, or the United States, but anywhere in the world, they're very smart. They get it, and they see what's real, what's not real, what's fantasy, and it was successful.
Can you tell us a bit about your thinking in selling Calvin Klein?
My thinking in selling, I think I pretty much did almost everything, or just about everything I wanted to do in the world of style. Early on, we started fragrance business that grew to be really sizable. I used to wear jeans I came up here in jeans and a leather jacket and put on a proper suit as soon as I got here. But I used to live in jeans. James Dean, the actor, was kind of my idol. So I thought it might be fun to do jeans, but do them differently than Levi at the time, who was the biggest. Do something different. And so I was able to do that. I loved marketing, and so I worked with advertising agencies a few times, and then I thought to myself, they don't understand what I'm talking about. We created the product. I'm trying to explain to them what it is we've created so that they can create an image for us. I said, there's something wrong with that. And I built my own in-house agency. And we did huge advertising for the fragrance company, for all the different companies. And I loved that, all that marketing. I felt I was starting to repeat myself, not getting as excited. I felt I was putting out fires all over the world, which is not so much fun. And I thought, I'd like to have time for myself, to really just enjoy myself and not. I don't really understand people who just want to do the same thing from until they die. There's still things I want to do.
What do you think the lasting impact of the Calvin Klein brand is on the entire industry?
The lasting impact. I think at a certain time we stood for American design. Most designers, when I was in school, most designers in New York were very influenced by Paris. Then the Italians came and they started doing things that were different than French. And I became known early on as the American. I think Ralph Lauren has taken over and through his stores and his commitment and his success, he's probably the most well-known American designer now. But I think that was it. We had an American point of view. We also had and still have, a minimalist point of view. I was always, I like the idea of stripping things down to what's essential, not decorating and adding design just as a gimmick and to make it look different than Donna Karan or someone else. And Donna is a very close friend of mine, as is Vera Wang, another designer you may know. And we all do something different. And often when I would be working on the collection and editing, then I would say, it looks like it belongs in Ralph's show, not ours. It just feels a little too Ralphie to me. So it was always developing your own identity. And I really thought about creating a brand when I started the fragrance business.
I think we'll open it up to questions from the audience now. So just stick your hand up, a microphone will come to you, stand up while you're asking your question, and we'll first go to the member right here in the black. Yeah.
Hi, thank you for being here. I want to know your thoughts on fast fashion and want to know, with a growing number of consumers now rejecting fast fashion, what you think the future of the fashion industry lies.
There's always a good future, I think, for fashion. The thing is, now it needs a real change. Because of the internet and how people are buying and what you can do online, retail stores, a lot of them are closing. And it's a time when designers are going to have to do something to make, to allow people to want to buy these clothes, because shopping in the stores is happening less and less. And I think we're about to see a real change over the next few years. But I think the future is always good. I mean, fashion is about change. And people want clothes. They don't need them. You have to just get them to want something. So I think it's positive.
Another question, and we'll go with the member in the red here.
Hi, thanks for coming today. My name is Justin. I've always been a fan, and my question is, Instagram has been testing the hiding likes around the world since August, and in order to improve the mental health and the quality of online discourse. And the CEO has actually announced that 3 days ago at a conference, saying that they will be testing hiding likes in the US starting from this week. I wanted to ask you, as a brand that use Instagram as one of the major channels to advertise, what do you have to say to Instagram's hiding engagement matrix, the action?
Wait, I'm not sure I fully understand the
It's a long
question. Can you give it to me a little bit again?
The question is, what do you think? What do you have to say towards Instagram?
Oh, to Instagram.
The action that they try to hide likes for influencers, so you won't, as audiences, won't be able to see how many likes you get anymore.
I don't think it means that much. This influencer thing, there's always been. It used to be that the magazine editors were the influencers. If they liked what they saw, they'd be photographed, and therefore they had a lot of influence. Now it's Instagram for everything, and that helps. It helps many people if they're projecting their clothes on Instagram. It's a good thing. I think that the people who have a lot of followers and who are trying to promote themselves, it's a fake, and everyone knows that. I think the photography itself is a great way to reach people. It's killed magazines, because if you can see what the designer did the next day, why would you want to wait 3 months to see when they did a trip to Brazil to photograph the clothes? It's obsolete. So, yeah, Instagram's a good vehicle to get your message across.
Another question. This time we'll go in the second row over here. Yeah. If you can just stand up.
Mr. Klein, thank you for being here. So when you started out with your company, I read that you had a partner who started the company with you, Mr. Schwartz. I was wondering, what went through your mind when you made the deliberate decision to call the brand Calvin Klein instead of Klein Schwartz? And then again, what kind of process was behind taking your name as a full name and putting it on all these clothes as the number one differentiating thing, or one of the things that differentiates your clothes?
Well, let me say first that Barry and I were best friends from the time we were 5 years old. We were just always pals. And there came a point, he was in his father's business, so he had a certain amount of money. I was just finishing art school and starting to work, but I wanted to start my own company. So he said, I'll give you the money. And I thought, well, if I'm going to do the work and it's my talent, your money is just as good. And so I said, let's split the business 50-50. And then we had to decide, well, what would we call it? And I thought the same thing, Klein Schwartz, not very appealing. And he said, let's call it Calvin Klein. He says, he knows nothing, and even to this day, about the fashion business. But he knew that. And so then we had a lot of great success with jeans. Brooke Shields were in the first ads. And then I couldn't stand seeing my name on things. I don't like wearing someone's label on my body. And so I decided to take the label after we were doing it for 5 years maybe. I said, I want to take the label off the jeans. And we did. We convinced the stores to buy them, and it tanked. Sales went to almost nothing. And then Barry looked at me and he said, why do you think people buy these jeans? He said, it's your name they want. And I guess I had to learn the hard way that some people need that identification. So the name's been on products ever since.
That's great. Another question then, and this time we'll go in the back, very near the back, if you, yeah.
Hi, I would be curious how your personal style has evolved throughout the years. You mentioned you came here with a leather jacket and so on. So I would be curious how it has changed how you've dressed yourself.
I always wore leather jackets and jeans and t-shirts. And then I was saying earlier, after I finished school and I started working, I was making my clothes at Anderson and Shepherd in London. Then we went into the men's business. Not something that I was ever that excited about. I really love doing clothes for women. But we went into the men's business and I'd wear the men's clothes. But it was always the way I wanted to look. And what I'm wearing right now is very similar to what I did 30 years ago or more. I would have done them in tweedy fabrics like Harris tweeds and all that kind of thing that Americans don't really like to wear, but I thought they looked great. So the style has evolved, but it's consistent. That's my personal style as well as the style of what we produced, all the clothes that we made.
Go for another question. How about just here?
Thank you very much for coming. My question is about the tension between the financial and artistic point of a business, especially now. I think a lot of luxury brands these days are entering the space of sort of semi-streetwear with, chunky sneakers and whatnot, and they're probably more accessible from a price point and are selling quite well. But I think maybe when you started out, this would have been something unthinkable for brands the big name brands to do? And do you think that this is maybe a result of the pressure from the conglomerates who own them to drive up their profit and their revenue in order not to lose out to fast fashion and more sort of new brands?
Well, are you referring to the tension between having to make money and wanting to create? Is essentially that what you're asking about?
Yes, but just more like if you think maybe sometimes pressure from the big sort of brands, the owners like the LVMH, the Kering Group, if that maybe forces some designers to slightly dilute their brand to be more accessible from a price point and be more profitable.
Everyone's different. I remember having to deal with the banks, and I couldn't stand it. I didn't like to owe money. And as the business grew, our need for money grew too. But then you have to explain to the banks all the time what you're doing. They didn't ask that the clothes be more accessible or that more commercial. But they just wanted to know when you're going to make money. And so you have that pressure, which you always have, because if you have employees, they have to be paid. So you do have the pressure that the company to exist has to be financially in good shape. And then you make these decisions. Sometimes they could be lots of decisions, but if I never found myself being faced with, I have to make it very commercial, because if I made it that commercial, I don't think anyone would buy it. But you need to find that balance, and that's part of what it is to be in business, in the fashion business.
Another question, and we'll go just over here in the grey.
Good evening, thank you for being here. So I read some articles about a show Calvin Klein did last year, which was themed American Horror Story, and that was deemed quite political. So I was wondering what you first of all thought about that specific show, and then also more generally whether you think fashion as a form of art should have more of a political role.
Well, first of all, I never saw any of the fashion shows that the company did from the day I sold it. I continued to contribute to the company for a few years, and then that was part of my contract. They wanted me to stay on. I wouldn't do it. So I don't even know what they did. I know they created a disaster. I mean, everyone knows that. And they hired an expensive designer to really ruin one of the collection businesses. As far as politics, you see different influences in fashion depending on what's happening in the world. I think if you set out to make just a political statement, I don't know how well that works. But if the country is in a depression, the clothes will reflect it from many people, not just one. So the climate in the world comes through because designers look for inspiration, and sometimes that inspiration is serious, political issues, and then it's valid. But I think if you're just making political statements to be different, no.
Another question. We'll go.
This gentleman's had his hand up a lot.
Let's go over here then. Yeah. And just wait for the microphone.
Thank you very much for appointing me. I have a question about the creativity. Two questions. Number one, how can you maintain your creativity or expand your creativity? And second question is the essence of those creativity can learn, or can you teach your successor in terms of fashion?
You know, when I must have interviewed, I don't know, a few thousand people over the years, design people. And sometimes I would call Ralph Lauren and I'd say, you know, I just saw someone out of school, he'd be perfect for you. I can tell if they have it in them and if it's a fit for my company, for my style. And I can lead them. I don't want to say teach, but you learn by being in an environment, in a design studio where lots of people have ideas. And you know, you just learn and you get better as if you really learn. There was a real look to the people who worked in my company, to the way they dressed, the way they hair and makeup. I mean, we had it, there was a certain way that you looked, as with Ralph Lauren. The people who work at Ralph, they all look like his ads. They're all photographed. I was married to one. She was Ralph's assistant. And she looked, you know, a beauty. Yeah, I mean, you can teach people, but it's better to start off finding talent that's on the same wavelength, and then it's easier to not just to teach, but to have them teach me.
We'll go for another question, this time the individual in the red.
Tom Ford spoke about how he was personally disappointed when he saw people who would buy a look head to toe from one of his shows and not put any spin on it at all. As a designer, what is your ideal client like in terms of their sartorial sense and their approach to fashion?
What's my ideal? Sorry? Client. Well, the ideal is to find someone who knows themselves and knows how to dress, knows what she likes. I mean, I'd worked with celebrities often, and often they have a PR person, they have a hairdresser, they have so many people telling them what to do because they don't know. But every so often you meet people who really have a sense of who they are, what kinds of clothes they like, and that's my ideal client.
Great, another question then, and we'll go right in the very, very back. I'm sure. It is you with your hand still up.
So during the interview, you mentioned something about wanting to do more. Could you elaborate on that?
I didn't know what that meant, wanting to do more. I thought I have to end what I was doing and then just see how things work. One of the things that we were talking about earlier before this interview was I worked with students with a charter school in Harlem, New York, and these were all underprivileged children who, if they were lucky, most of them lived with one grandparent because of drugs and physical abuse. And they've been through so much. And I work with the school designing uniforms to give them an identity and give them a sense of something they could be proud of. Excuse me. And so that was great fun, making clothes for the smallest kindergarten through high school. And I worked on that with my ex-wife. And she has a child now. So she was great help about what, different women, young girls would want at different ages. And I also worked, I spoke to a class. They were about 10 years old, maybe 11. And I spoke to them about what I've been able to do with my life, my work. And then we opened it up to questions. And they were some of the best questions I've ever had anywhere. These children were not intimidated. They've been through so much that they were asking questions that I later said to the headmaster, I didn't know how to answer them because they were too personal. Yet I wanted to be able to give them a sense that you can make something of yourself, in life, and you create your own breaks and all of that. But they were fantastic. I mean, so I got so much. I do get so much when I speak to groups and I hear what their concerns are. But amazing from 11-year-olds. They are very sharp. And they really, I had the best time. So anyway, that's one of the things. I've been doing lots of things, but that's just an idea of something that's completely unexpected.
Another question then, here in the front row in the red.
Hi, good evening. I was just wondering what you were talking about the decline of written, physical forms of fashion journalism. For example, when you were saying that Instagram is everything. And when you see a lot of journalists, for example, Eva Chen, who is the head of fashion Instagram, and she was a pre-med student and then all of a sudden changed career paths. I was just wondering, in a slice of journalism that is already so niche, I was just wondering how would one even begin, even if you didn't have a background of like fashion journalism, etc., like how would one get into this already very exclusive field?
Well, you get a job picking up pins in a design room, is what you do. You go, I mean, if I were a student, I would go to the designers that I was really interested in their work and let them somehow know that you would do anything to work there. And that's how you start. That's how every designer started, being an assistant, picking up fabric from the floor, just being there, getting inside the house. And then it's a process. You get to learn and you get to do more, and and you see where that takes you. But there are always entry jobs for people who have talent. So there's always opportunity.
That's great. Another question then, and we'll go to the member in the purple by the door. I think it's purple, maybe pink. Yeah, over there.
Hi, I'm Pavel. Thank you for coming tonight. You mentioned that there's still many things that you want to do in your life. So my question is, what are those things? How do you see your future?
Well, I always thought if I couldn't be a designer, I'd like to be an architect. And I've spent a number of years building a house in the Hamptons in New York, one in Los Angeles, my apartment in New York City, working closely with architects or doing it myself. And then I've talked with investors, friends of mine, about doing hotels. But it just seems too long. It's a long, long project, and I wasn't that interested. And then it was going to cities in the world that I had no interest in going to. Recently, Aston Martin, the automaker, wanted me to design for them. And reality came into the picture, and we talked for a while, and they gave me a car, actually, to drive, which I wasn't so thrilled with. But they couldn't afford me. I mean, I wasn't looking for a salary, but the way I live and the way I travel, they couldn't afford to do that. And I thought, well, do I really want to fly to God knows where the factory is outside of London, 2 hours or something? And so in the end, while I was so interested in doing it, it just wasn't practical. But I'm finding things. Thanks.
And we'll go just behind that to the member in the corner in the purple.
Thank you so much for coming today. And my question is, what were some of your main struggles when you were young and starting out and possibly struggling as a designer, as an artist, and how did you overcome that? Thank you.
What were my main struggles?
Yeah, struggles or challenges or difficulties, and how you overcame them.
Yeah. I didn't struggle with the work. I didn't struggle with creating clothes, getting into the schools I wanted to get into. I was fortunate. I had other struggles, personal demons, and that you go through as a teenager and all that kind of thing. Well, later on, but this is life. I mean, everyone's got issues, and you learn to deal with them. But whatever personal issues I had, somehow it didn't interfere with the work. And maybe I got through life more easily because of the work. I was so focused. I was a workaholic. So I would say I was really fortunate, and most fortunate that I knew from an early age what interested me. And I remember a conversation I had with my daughter, who was just graduating Brown University. And she said, I don't know, she doesn't know what she wants to do. And I said, well, what do you like? What do you enjoy? I mean, she says, well, I love television and this, that. And she says, I'd like to write comedy. So I said, okay. And I said, I know a few people. And we got her a job. I mean, she got the job, but we got her an introduction to Lorne Michaels, who was the head of Saturday Night Live, the creator. And Marcy's job was to bring coffee to famous people. And while everyone's smoking joints and getting high and not doing what they're supposed to do and getting fired, Marcy started to rise up until she was producing. And the telephone conversation that I had with her was, just do something that will be fun. Do something that will be exciting. And if you don't know what that is, try it. Try anything. And then if it doesn't work, try something else. But go for something in life that's really going to excite you and challenge you. And it turned out she's been very successful. And then decided to raise her children and be a mother, and she's been very successful at that. And now she's back at work again. So you don't know where life will lead you, but I think if you follow what your heart, follow what you feel, I think you're ahead of the game.
We should have time for one more question, and we'll go just near the back in the aisle. No, on the other side, just beside you.
Hi, so you said that fashion should evolved because our way of buying clothes has evolved. And I would like to ask you your view on the evolution of the beauty, how you perceive the evolution of beauty, how is that it has influenced you through the years.
Well, I started a cosmetics company, and fragrance and cosmetics. And I loved working on that. That was great. What I've realized at some point, that the look, the beauty, the look that we get used to changes every decade. And if you go, I will go to the theater in New York or here, you can tell by the makeup and the hair what decade they're in. The beauty, the look, you can tell by the clothes too, but it's easy with hair and makeup. And that evolves. That doesn't change every season the way clothes change, but it does evolve. And it's that success, you know, it's, the beauty world is still, I mean, Chanel sells more lipstick than probably anyone I can imagine. You know, that will always be part of the overall fashion world and world of style.
I'm afraid that is all we have time for. But Calvin, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you.